All right, let's go to Bench Taco. How you
Hey,
doing, Bench?
it's been a while.
It has. It has. How you been?
I have been doing pretty good. I'm becoming a Roman Catholic here in a few months.
Oh my goodness. How
Yeah.
about that? Yeah. And what brought on that change?
The history and the traditions.
The history and the traditions?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
was actually going to say, do you think that tradition and history would actually make a difference in your opinion on religion?
Would it make a difference? Well, I mean, I was a Catholic, so it didn't make a difference for me.
Ah, that's fair.
Um, yeah. And you could say that, I mean, Hinduism has been around for what, 4,600 years?
Hmm.
Judaism has been around for about that long too, 5,000 years, give or take.
Yeah.
Um, I Yeah, that has a lot of history and tradition. I mean, you can't have history and tradition and be around. You can't not have it and be around for that long, right? And Catholicism's been around for 2,000 plus years. So
So I
what?
was gonna ask,
Yeah,
um,
go ahead.
you're gonna know a lot more about Marian Apparitions than I. But what are your opinions
Ah, maybe,
on
maybe
the church's what's your opinion on the church's the Marian apparition specifically?
Marian apparitions.
Hmm.
Um, I see it in the same view as other like miracles and apparitions and things like that in other religions. Like we've got in Hinduism, there's currently a guru out there where people are going to this guru for healing, and he is healing people, supposedly healing people on the spot. There's thousands of witnesses. There's gurus that have walked on water in India. Have you heard of them?
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So I kind of put that in the same in the same box, basically. Um, you
What if there
know,
was a photo?
what if there was a photo? Eh,
Yeah.
that would be compelling. Um, what would we compare it to then? Like, if there's a photo, yeah, photos are, because I wouldn't sit there. I'm not going to sit there and automatically dismiss everything. Oh, it's Photoshop, or oh, it's this, oh, it's that. Yeah, it's worth looking into. It's worth investigating. Now, how would we investigate that photo? Like or what else could we use to determine something is like if the Marian apparitions are true? Like there's photos. What else could we do?
I don't necessarily know about what you could compare that to other than relying on folk tales or tradition, which I mean I don't necessarily know if that you would disqualify that. But I
Mm,
was looking into the Marian apparitions that happened in Egypt specifically on top
mm-hmm,
of a Coptic church.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
this is where things get really interesting. This is a Muslim country, predominantly Muslim country, and this happened for years. This was going on for years, and then they stopped. The Marian apparitions stopped in 1971. So this first started
mm,
happening in 1968, and it stopped in 1971. And what's interesting is that the president of Egypt actually saw this, and verified, he verified that these things were going on. Was like, yeah, this is definitely happening. And what's also going on too, if we're talking about skepticism, there's no there's no natural explanation that has came out yet. 50 plus years after these events happened, they were looking for projectors. They were looking for any way if these things could be, what's the word? Um, if they were looking for natural explanations to these Marian apparitions, right?
mm-hmm.
They were not able to come up with any conclusion that there was some other rational explanation yet.
Now this happened 50 years ago, right?
Hmm.
Ish. And are they happening now?
No, like I said, they stopped in 1971.
Yeah, they stopped in the 70s. So what's the possibility that we just didn't have any equipment back then to measure anything?
Measure?
Like we didn't have the technology to capture something, measure something, like, because it's been 50 years. We've got a lot more sophisticated technology today. So if it were happening today, we might be able to, you know,
Yeah,
capture
that's the
something
funny
like
thing is like,
measurement.
How would you even measure a spirit?
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
how would
that's
it
a great,
work?
it's a great point.
I feel like this is a really good metaphysical question. If we could if we could measure a hypothetical spirit, how would that even happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess we'd have to know, like, first of all, what are we exactly measuring? Like, so what is a spirit?
That's a really good question. That's been
Yeah,
something that's been something that I've been wondering myself. When I was
yeah.
like,
What is it? Like, what's it made of? And then where does it go? Like when you die, if it is there, where does it go?
yeah,
Um,
that's been a question I myself have been pondering in regards to these metaphysical claims about spirits or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Um, but the Marian apparitions in general, when I was looking into them, it's like, don't get me wrong, I was skeptical, and then I'm like, this is so inconclusive. But I can understand why people believe it
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
this wasn't like 12 eyewitnesses of Jesus' resurrection or 500 witnesses. These are thousands upon thousands of people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we've got thousands of witnesses who have seen these apparitions, right? Um, Now on the other side of it, we have thousands upon, like I go back to the Hindu guru example. We have thousands upon thousands of witnesses who have seen this guy heal, who have seen this guy walk on water. Does that make those true?
Maybe.
Maybe.
See,
Now this is interesting though.
I don't just discount personal experience if it contradicts my
Right,
worldview. I don't do that.
right. Well, it's interesting though because with the now, are you saying maybe to the apparitions, or are you saying yeah, this happened? Like what's your
Maybe to their testimonies as to
maybe to their testimonies?
yeah.
Yeah, I say maybe. I mean, yeah, maybe it happened. Um, I think I'm kind of in the, like, okay, so um, are, because because maybe is like in the middle, right? It's not yes, it's not no, it's somewhere in the middle. But would you say that a maybe could also like lean yes, lean no, maybe yes, maybe no?
Maybe yes, maybe no. Go ahead.
Yeah, like you could lean, and then there's different like there's a different spectrum of leaning. Like you could say, yeah, it's a maybe, but I'm strongly believing it, versus it's a maybe, but maybe not. I'm not so
Maybe, but
strongly
maybe
believing
not.
it.
But
Yeah, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe, but maybe yes.
what makes the Marian apparition or the Our Lady in Zaytun, Egypt, different
Hmm.
is I will go ahead and I'll just go ahead and do this.
All right, I'm gonna have to make you full screen, but forgive me. It's been so long since I've been on.
You're fine.
There we go. There we go. I made you number one. So what are we looking at here?
These are pictures of these supposed Marian apparitions.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you said, what if there's a photo? So there are photos. Okay.
There are
Okay.
photos,
Yeah. 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 I see
which
that.
don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this cannot be altered or whatever.
And
Right?
I'm not going to say that either. Yeah. I'm not going to say it's altered, or just, I'm not going to effectively dismiss it. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was also going to say that my challenge to you would be to look into this for yourself because I wanted to come
Sure.
back to you on this one and like another day, and I wanted you to give me your opinion on it.
Okay. All right. I'll look into it. So Marian apparitions.
Marian apparitions. If you want the exact like what the Catholic Church says, Our Lady of
Mhm.
Zaytun, Zeitoun. That's the official name of the apparition.
Okay. And yeah, because I remember when I was a kid, which is a long time ago. I remember we learned in Sunday school, in Catholic school, about Our Lady of Fatima and things like that. So
Yeah,
it sounds a lot.
it appears
Yeah.
that the Virgin Mary has been apparently instrumental in the conversion of a lot of cultures.
Yeah. It appears,
Which,
yeah. So if this is true, she's been busy, right?
yeah, she's been busy.
Yeah, she's been busy. Yeah, I'll look into it, my guy. I will look into it. So,
Yeah, that was that's what I was gonna say. Like that's what I wanted you to look into. I was gonna ask if you wanted to pick up on a conversation we had a few months ago.
yeah, let's do that. Refresh my memory, because I could probably dig through my notes, but you sounds like you have it right at your fingertips. So I'll let
I
you
think what we
take
talked
the wheel.
about last time was maybe a philosophical necessity for God's existence.
Philosophical necessity. Okay.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
obviously this has no real grounding, but would you agree that the thought process of a God's existence is rational?
It is rational in the sense that it is not self-contradictory and it's not logically absurd. So yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to strawman an atheistic position on the Big Bang. I'm not going to do that. But I do not necessarily believe in like a infinite negative regress either.
Okay.
So,
All right.
for instance, I do not observe life coming from non-life. I do not observe anything in creation that exists without having a first cause, right? So like for stars in general, we can come to a first cause as to what caused them to form, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with planets, same things with basically there's a contingency to things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we go then there's a contingency for what causes you or I to exist, or what causes my dog here that I love to exist.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then we go to the beginning. Something cannot come from nothing because we can exist something because we can always observe something coming from something else.
Right. Right. I hear that. So let me ask you this, Mr. Bench Taco. If just because we see what we observe, does that make it true in every case?
True in every case?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. I think
Yeah,
that,
not necessarily.
Scientific processes can change over time.
Yeah.
Right?
It's compelling though what you're saying. Yeah, it's compelling what you're saying. Don't get me wrong, it's compelling. And it's worth and I like talking about this because it's really cool to think about and talk about. But I can go a couple different ways. Do you want to do the necessary versus contingent because you brought that up, or do you want to kind of dive further into infinite regress? We can go either way, whichever way you want to go. I'm here for it.
You can go ahead. You can go ahead and start us off.
Okay.
I want to hear your thought process first.
All right. Well, why don't we go with necessary versus contingent today? We can tackle infinite regress another day. Then that keeps you coming back, man, because I always love it when you come back. So we'll start with necessary versus contingent. So if I'm hearing you correctly, everything has to have a contingency because everything has to have a cause. Everything has to have a start. Like I'm contingent upon my parents, right? And my parents are contingent upon their parents, and so on and so on and so forth, right? Okay. But at some point it has to have a stop. Something has to have started it all, right? And then your contention is that something or someone who started it all is God. Am I hearing that? And that makes God necessary, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. How did God start everything? In your mind, just in your mind, in your worldview, how did God start everything? How did he do it? Like
this might contradict some of the theists in the comments. I don't necessarily care.
I don't care either.
I first off, I'll use some scripture to back this up, right? So who gave Noah the blueprints for the ark, or the idea of how to build the ark?
God did.
God did, right? So God, we can already infer, just through a personal discussion with his creation, is a creator, because he is giving exact blueprints as to how to build this massive boat that's supposed to hold all these animals, right?
Yeah.
We also see in Job. We also see in the book of Job when God is basically having this discussion with Job, like, where were you when I laid the foundations for this, for that, for this, for that? Where were you when I created all this, right? I see God as a creative being. How he laid out these groundworks, I think first off, he operates within logic and reason.
Logic and reason. Okay. Yeah.
He cannot be self-contradictory. That's not necessarily putting a limitation on God's power, but that's saying that God operates within certain limits. So he cannot create something, a square circle or a married bachelor. something like that.
Right.
God as a lawgiver would give laws. So something like the laws of entropy, the laws of gravity, the laws of motion, so on and so forth. He creates laws for order, right? Like the chaos that we observe does not really contradict the laws that he put in place for this order of creation, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
I would argue that how God created the universe was acting in a creative standpoint of creating laws and creating logic, therefore making the universe consistent.
Yeah. Okay, I'm following you. So it follows that God used logic and reason to create everything. And so let me shift it just a tiny bit, because I'm getting your kind of your worldview on necessary versus contingent in focus here. As far as would you agree then that if God were necessary, then that means that if God exists, if we could demonstrate that God exists, say, in one world, one possible world, would you agree that God would have to exist in all possible worlds? Because if God is necessary, that means that everything starts with God. So then that means no possible world would exist without God. So would you agree with that?
That's an interesting question. I've never actually considered the possibility of like other worlds or universes, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So just any possible world. Yeah.
I could see it because we don't hold God as something like that operates within the realms of a physical world. I can see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he would have to exist in all possible worlds if he exists in one. Just one. So like he couldn't not exist, because if you think about it, if you're saying God is the catalyst for everything, which is all possible worlds, so that must mean that God, if let's just say one possible world exists in which there is definitive proof that God exists, let's just say that, right? And it's not, and if it were this world, it's this world, whatever it is. But let's just say there's just one world, but in all the other possible worlds, there's no proof at all. Then that would have to mean, if God is necessary for all these other possible worlds to exist, that he would exist in all possible worlds.
Okay. So basically, if there was no evidence for God in another possible world, he would not exist within this world, right?
There you go. Yeah. See, so then the inverse may be true as well.
This is not necessarily punching holes in your argument here, but how would you observe these other possible worlds?
That's a great question. And I don't know. I wouldn't know how to observe all these possible worlds.
Yeah, I think in general, like the multiverse ideas are kind of compelling, but so like there's no really definitive answer,
Yeah.
That's what makes this realm of discussion really interesting.
It makes it interesting, yeah. So but if there were possible worlds, wouldn't you say that God would exist in those too?
Most possibly, yes.
Most possibly? Well, because he
probably would.
Yeah, because okay, well then we can kind of parse it out here. So, because you said God operates within logic and reason, right? God has logic and reason. What are the other characteristics of God that make him necessary?
Okay.
Like what other attributes does he have?
So I've already established some other contentions, right? So I would also have to establish the all-powerfulness, being that he would have the just in general, just the capability of creating these worlds, right?
Mm-hmm.
We would have to humanize God here a little bit. He would also have to be all-loving in the sense that he would have to have a reason as to why to create creation. So all-loving, all-power, all-knowing in aspect in how he would know to create X, Y, and Z. Okay. Those are the three foundations I would have to put on God.
Yeah. So I think then you're making a good case that if there are possible other worlds, let me kind of parse it out this way, because when we talk about possibilities, right, we're saying that it's logically possible. So is it logically I'm getting a call here. Sorry about that. Hold on. Sorry, I got a call. I came in. If we're talking about, so I guess we got to kind of step back and look at possible, like the word possible. So when we mean possible, what do you think we mean by that? Like, what do you like when you say something's possible? What would you like? What attributes does that thing
Possible?
have? What? Yeah, like it's possible.
Potentiality.
Yeah. Potentiality. Okay, and what makes up potentiality?
The odds that something is true.
Odds that something is true. Yeah. And does logic come into that? Like it has to logically make sense for it to be possibly true.
I would say logic is the basis for everything that we base
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So for something to be logical, there's two things that we have to look at, right? That it cannot be self-contradictory, like what you said earlier, a squared circle. That's self-contradictory, right? Looks like he's getting a call too. Oh, there you go. All right. So it can't be logically absurd, right?
Right.
Like, for example, going within the constraints of the characteristics of God that a lot of people talk about. Like one thing I mean, it's kind of like a silly thing that a lot of atheists say, like if, could God create a rock heavy enough that he can't lift it? To me, that's absurd. I mean, it's funny, but it's absurd.
Me personally, I take that question as in, can you smell the number 3?
Yeah, exactly. It's absurd, right? Yeah. It's absurd. You can't smell the number 3. It doesn't make sense. It's absurd. Yeah. So it's nonsensical, but it's just a silly way to troll believers. I'll be honest about that. I'm paring back the atheist secret. Yeah, it's a weak argument. It's absurd. It's just, and it's meant to be absurd. That's what it's meant to be.
If you want my opinion on like really good atheistic like opinions, right, or like philosophical stance against the idea of God, like you could literally go with the divine hiddenness argument, and that's actually a good argument.
Yeah,
like
you could.
I'll be honest. I have looked into both theistic and atheistic philosophy.
Yeah. You could.
Both make really good cases.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, to me, there's holes in that too, because then you could just say, as a theist, you could say, well, God's all powerful, all knowing, all loving. He can do whatever he wants. If he wants to be divinely hidden, he can be divinely hidden. And who says he's divinely hidden? We could see it in all these other different things. You could take that a whole bunch of different ways and just totally dismantle it. So yeah, to me, it's it goes either way. So so back to possible. So we've established that for something to be possible, it has to be logical, and it has to meet the two conditions of logic, not be self-contradictory, and it can't be absurd. So is it logically possible that there are other worlds? Because it's not self-contradictory and it's not absurd, right? Okay, so it's possible. And then, so in these possible worlds, it's also logically possible that God can exist in all of these worlds. God would exist in all these worlds if he's necessary, which also means, so then we can go to, if God is necessary, then that means if he exists in one world, one possible world, then he exists in all possible worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you with me? All right.
I'm with you.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you a kind of a summary. Have you read about von Ingwagen's Knowno? Have you read about that?
I have not.
Okay, that'd be really interesting for you to check out. And he's Peter van Ingwagen, and if you just Google Van, V-A-N, and then Ingwagen, and then the word Knowno, Knowno. And there's a lot of philosophical jargon. You're a smart guy, you'll get it. But for me, I had to have ChatGPT explain it to me like I'm 5. So, so I'm slow. But essentially, so hopefully I don't butcher this. But essentially, what it means is the Knowno is a brute fact of why we exist. It's just a brute fact. So we don't know what this brute fact is, and it could be God. It could be, because an equation or whatever. It's just a brute fact. So, if So if you just take it from that standpoint, is the no-no impossible? So is the no-no possible? Just based on how we figured out that God exists and that other possible worlds exist. If we use the same logic.
So would it be possible? Like, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from here, real quick.
Yeah.
So
and I might be totally butchering this. So yes, please ask me
I'm
a lot of questions.
Not straw man your position, because I do actually want to engage with this honestly. Can you re-sum up your point real quick? Like
yes. Okay. So we're talking about the concept of a no-no, Knowno, right? And the no-no is just a brute fact of why everything exists. It's just a simple brute fact, or it can be a complicated brute fact, but it's a brute fact. And it could be anything. It could be a god. It could be the god you believe in. It could be whatever. It could be a god. It could be a creator. It could be an equation. It could be a random event. It could be anything. But it's a brute fact. And so, are you with me on that so far?
Yeah. So there can be other possible outcomes, right?
Yeah. It's a possible outcome, but it's a brute fact. It just explains why we're here. That's it. So the first test we apply to it is the possibility test the logical possibility test. So,
okay.
Can you see anything in that where it would be self-contradictory?
In my worldview, like as being a contingent? No.
Okay. And then could you see anything in the no-no that could be considered absurd? Like, that's absurd. There's no no-no. That's totally absurd.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, right? So it's possible then. So that's possible that there.
I think as long as these other possibilities do not equate to something coming from nothing, mm-hmm. I think then these other possibilities are not inherently absurd.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just saying that, and I'm just looking strictly at the necessary versus contingent view. I'm just looking strictly at that, because you're saying, hey, God is necessary, so that means we're all contingent. Great. Mm-hmm. And so me as an atheist, I would naturally say, well, how do you know it's God? And then you'd say, well, because of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? And so all I'm doing here is, what I'm trying to attempt to do is just plug in, instead of God, I plug in the no-no. So the no-no is necessary, and everything else is contingent. And we've already established that it could be anything. It could be a brute fact. It's just a brute fact on why we exist. So it could be other possible reasons. So, and then we've already also established that the no-no is logically possible. So, so if we've got God and the no-no, and we plug in the no-no for God and say the no-no is necessary, well, is that now logically possible?
It's not logically possible. I think it would have to depend on what the no-no is.
It would depend, right? And that kind of underscores my point. Depending on what it is, it makes sense. It's possible. Well, no. I misspoke. Not that it makes sense. That it's possible.
I'm not accusing you of making this distinction, but is this basically an attempt at a Gods of the Gaps fallacy, pretty much?
Not necessarily. It doesn't quite. It doesn't quite go there. What all we're trying to do is just ask, well, why does it have to be God that's necessary? If it's because you just said, hey, it depends what it is. It depends what the no-no is.
Yeah, no, I'm just.
You see what I'm saying?
I'm trying to understand your position, because obviously I have not read about the no-no. So
I
have to catch up with what you're going at.
Yeah. But that's essentially what I'm saying, is that because maybe it'll make more sense after because you're going to go back and read it, of course, and then reflect on this conversation and say, oh, okay, I think I see what he's doing, even though I'm totally caveman in this, I'm butchering this. But
don't get me wrong, philosophy is not my strongest suit either. My whole thing is theology. So.
Okay. And so I'm just saying, why couldn't it be? Because then I could say, well, why couldn't it be just a law? Why couldn't it be an equation? Why couldn't it be random chance? Why couldn't it be the universe instead of, being necessary instead of God? So why does it have to be God versus universe, for example?
I cannot necessarily attack an equation standpoint since I don't fucking know math. That's black magic to me. So I think in general is like what we're talking about, like these philosophical probabilities, right?
Yeah.
It could be this natural. This is not, by the way, not necessarily to attack your viewpoint here. Is we can still say that all of these other no-nos that would make our potentiality or our existence contingent on something, we can still tie that back to God.
We could,
because, like I said,
okay.
I've already given God like some sort of constraint, right? That he does operate in, which is logic and reason. And I also did imply that God is a lawgiver, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I think you and I can both agree that we observe things in the natural world that some things just have to operate in a certain way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Unless we get into some like really weird scientifical debates or whatever, where shit can go either way. I don't know all that.
Shit could go either way. Okay. Well, then this kind of brings up another good point. Because if we're saying God operates in logic and reason, then does that mean logic and reason always existed?
I would say logic and reason did not exist until God existed, or not until God willed it into existence. If that makes sense.
Willed it into existence. Okay. So
at least that we can observe logic and reason.
How did then? What other tools then did God use to will logic and reason into existence?
I would say since I hold God to be eternal, He just always had that. But the universe itself, I'm not going to straw man the Big Bang. But
yeah.
But if I presuppose that literally nothing existed before the events of the Big Bang, but God is eternal, right? God would have always had logic and reason, meaning that He can build the foundations for logic and reason in the natural world.
Okay, so that means logic and reason have been eternal as well.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And okay, so if logic and so then we're kind of adding on things. So because God, so that means love has always been around, right? Omniscience is always love is eternal. Omniscience is eternal. Omnipotence is eternal because these are all qualities of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Omnipotence, omniscience, love, anything else, jealousy, because God, it does say in the Bible, I'm a jealous God. Oh, it's got a call. He'll come back. Yeah. So
it's just
all of these,
like my phone keeps like going on and off the battery. So it's like, your phone's at 10%, blah blah blah. I'm like,
oh no.
Yeah, okay. No, you're fine. You're fine, dude.
Okay. All right.
I like to like walk around instead of like stay seated when I'm having like discussions like this over TikTok.
Yeah, me too. And it's kind of hard for me because like I have to sit stationary to stay in front of the camera. But yeah, I feel you. Like I do better when I walk around and do something. Yeah. So it's tough for me. Okay. And so that being the case, if logic and reason have always been around, have been eternal, then does that? So then let's talk about then like how about like a mind? Like a mind has a beginning, right? Because like a mind in a baby or in a fetus, it has to grow and things like that. At what point does logic and reason? Well, can a mind exist without logic and reason?
Can a mind exist without logic and reason?
Or maybe function, because it can exist like if say a person is comatose, like or brain unalived, it technically exists. The brain is intact. It just doesn't do anything. Right. Yeah, so it could technically function without that, but exist. Function. How about that? Could a mind function without logic and reason?
Can a mind function without logic and reason? That's a really good question. I would actually have to reflect on that after this conversation.
Okay.
But for now, I'm going to have to say no.
Okay. Because I agree with you on that. Does that then make, so then the question is, if logic and reason, so would it follow then that if we say no, because I'm agree with you on that. So let's just say the answer is no. Mind cannot function without logic and reason. Does that mean that the mind is contingent upon logic and reason to function?
I would have to say, in a sense, yes, it would have to. But at the same time, if both of these constants are eternal, and logic and reason would have to be the contingency for a mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
If both of these things are eternal, you could then argue that since logic and reason has been eternal with the mind, that even though the mind is contingent on logic and reason does not necessitate it having to predate the mind, just having to sustain the mind, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But then it would still follow then that the logic and reason are necessary for a mind to function.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So does that then mean that logic and reason are necessary
For our existence?
for anything?
Or for anything, I would have to say yes.
Yeah. So then does that mean, so if God couldn't create creation without logic and reason, does that mean, so is God contingent upon logic and reason?
Maybe. Honestly, that's a maybe.
Now, but then that means God isn't necessary. God is contingent.
God
Yeah.
is contingent.
Because because if you can't create things without logic and reason, if God can't operate without logic and reason, that means that how else would have God created if not with logic and reason?
Yeah, but what I was saying is, I'm familiar. I know that you're familiar with the idea of parallels on a graph, right? Like infinite parallels on a graph.
It's been a while, but yeah.
What I was arguing is with so what I was arguing is like in regards to parallels, right? Give me a second.
Yeah. Take your time, man.
Graphs, like these graphs that we see, and this is the closest thing. This is the closest thing that I can.
Let me make you big again. Hold on, let me expand you. Okay.
When we talk about like these ideas of infinites, right?
Yeah.
These graphs, like these parallels, go on forever. They just do. What I'm arguing is just, let's just say if the mind is contingent on logic and reason, this is the mind, and this right here is logic and reason, right? Both of these things would have had to exist simultaneously. Or
would
basically eternal. Both of these things would have had to exist eternally, coinciding with each other. For the God graph that I have that I've presented to you to function.
I see what you mean. Okay, I think I'm following you. Yeah. All right. Okay. So logic and reason and the mind have to be together, right? Okay. Let me make you small again. Okay.
And this does somewhat coincide with like some sort of Trinitarian models that you see, where there is some contingency between like, well, not necessarily like, actually no, yeah, some sort of contingency between like the Son, the Holy Spirit, and the Father, some shit like that, right? They're like we already have theological ideas based off of what I'm saying.
Okay. I see where you're going with that. That's an interesting thing. I'm gonna have to ponder that for a bit. Yeah, can you run that by me one more time, just so I write it down, just because I'll forget later? Or actually, I could look at the recording. But yeah, please say it again.
Yeah. So that is the idea of God that I have personally built up. Obviously, with some taking and borrowing from other philosophical ideas of God, that is the personal God idea that I have come up with as to the nature of God and how he works.
Okay. Okay. I think I'm with you on that. All right. Okay, man. This went pretty deep. Hey, for being a theologian and not a philosopher, you held your own pretty well. You got my brain cooked. So that's pretty good.
I'm actually really curious as to what the chat thinks of how I did personally.
Let's see. Hey, chat. What do you think? How do you think Bench Taco did? What do you guys say? Great. We got a great, very good conversation. A thumbs up. So three so far. Yeah, I agree with them. So thumbs up from me. That was really good. We always have good talks anyway. So yeah, Dean the Dude. Yeah, there you are. Very good. All right. So let's pick that up next time. I want to move on to somebody else. Give someone else an opportunity. But that was good stuff, man.
I still challenge you to look into the Marian Apparitions because
I will do that.
Those ideas that I find to be really good points of discussion.
I think we have some homework to do then. I've got the Marian Apparitions. I'm going to challenge you to look at the Knowno. Van Ingwagen's Knowno. Yeah.
Let me look at the. I need the name of the author, by the way. VAN.
VAN, and then the next word is INGWAGEN. And then
so INGWANG.
ING, like the German spelling of wagon. INGWAGEN.
Okay, so this is
I'll type it into the. Yeah, he's an American philosopher, and then the Knowno is KNOWNO, and it's like a blending of words. It's just a brute fact we know nothing about. That's basically what it means. It's a brute fact we know nothing about. No.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Check it out.
Go now. God bless
all right,
you,
man.
You have a good one.
Hey, and congrats on getting all the sacraments out of the way, man. That's a big life accomplishment.
Yeah.
So
I'm really
awesome,
I'm really
man. Congrats. All right, man. Have a good one. Take care.